Creative ministry can run at a high level for years, while the person doing it quietly runs out of things to say. The work still lands, but the refilling stopped a while back and nobody schedules that part. I'm Caitlin, and this is one of the 10 sessions from the SALT Community Library that we're releasing ahead of our SALT 2026 conference in Dallas this October. Carrie Loomis, a brilliant graphic designer at New Vision Church here in Nashville, takes on why creative ministry is deeply fulfilling and quietly depleting at the same time. And of course, what it actually takes to still be doing this in 10 years with your joy intact. Carrie does a great job applying graphic design to local church. So let's let Carrie take it away.
Hi friends, my name is Carrie Loomis. I am the lead graphic designer at New Vision in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. My role specifically is on the communications team, and our team is responsible for communicating church-wide and ministry-level events and campaigns. There are 6 of us on the team, and we serve 2 campuses. We see about 4,000 to 5,000 people each weekend across campuses, so we've got a lot going on all the time. The primary things that we do on the communications team is support ministries and church-wide events through social media, artwork, video, email, other things like that. So in my role specifically, I help with creative direction and execution of things like sermon series, big campaigns like Christmas and Easter. I also do some ministry events, but a lot of that ends up getting contracted out because I'm the only designer. I do, however, have my hands on a lot of the creative direction for those events. All that to say, I have a pretty good grasp on what it looks like to be a creative in ministry. Unlike a lot of staff members at my organization, however, I did not start my professional career in ministry. My first career was in higher education, and I worked in the university system of Georgia and the university system of Tennessee for almost 10 years. I made the transition into graphic design full-time, which was pretty seamless just because my background is in art. It's in fine art. I'm a creative by nature. So that transition came pretty easily for me. But what did not come easily was the day-to-day of that transition. I think that being creative minded was really easy, but doing things on a day-to-day basis and interacting with other people in ministry really, really changes the way that you go about creative things. And it can be very, very frustrating sometimes. I'm going to start by confessing something that I think pretty much any creative will understand and feel, but maybe we would feel bad about admitting it. Working in creative ministry full-time is not always fun or exciting or creatively fulfilling. Working in creative ministry can actually be really, really difficult. I know that for me, there have been days where I've sat at my desk looking at the projects that I have to do, and I have just been completely uninspired and unmotivated to do any of them. Sometimes it's because the creative direction of the project is not good and I've had no say, or like I can't give my input or anything like that. Sometimes it's because I just have an incredible volume of work, so it's overwhelming and there's a lot to do. Sometimes I'm just burnt out from delivering graphic after graphic that has to look different and be exciting and fun, but you can only really do that so many times at once before you're just kind of exhausted. Some days are really, really good, but some days can also be really, really difficult creatively. And maybe you have felt that as well. There's a little bit of like a quiet exhaustion that will just kind of creep up on you as you pour your creative energy into projects that maybe you aren't really interested in or that you really are struggling with. And when that exhaustion hits you full force, it can feel debilitating and it can quickly cause you to burn out. When you're in that mindset, it can be really, really hard, right? There's a contrast of things. There's this burnout and this frustration, but there's also this love for your church and the love for what you do and the love for this collective mission that you have with your organization. At the end of the day, the goal is to share the gospel, to know Christ, make him known, guide people to lives of gospel transformation. And so being so frustrated with your work while also truly loving that can be really conflicting and really difficult to kind of reconcile. And it's hard. It is really, really hard. Sometimes people won't know what you do. Sometimes if they do know what you do, they can think that it's something that's like easy or fun or really exciting because it is something creative. As creatives, people a lot of times don't know what we do. If they do know what we do, they think that it's easy and it's fun just because it is something creative. Our professional insight can often be overlooked or not even really considered when an idea is brought up, which can be really hard to deal with. And a lot of times we're constantly balancing large projects, a lot of projects, quick turnarounds, and a lot of last minute changes. If you are at all like me, you may have at some point wondered, like, how am I supposed to do this with a joyful spirit when I am not able to do anything when I'm stuck in this box. It can feel incredibly limiting. And that is kind of what I want to talk to you guys about today. Working as a creative in ministry is one of the most fulfilling jobs, but it can also be one of the most frustrating. So I want to talk to you today a little bit about how we can stay creatively inspired, not just because it's good for our work and good for videos or graphics or anything like that, but because it impacts our hearts, it impacts what we're called to do, and it impacts the work that God has entrusted to us. Talking about how to stay creatively inspired is really, really important to me. It's something that's very personal to me. About a year ago, I went through one of the most challenging times in my career that I've ever had. It took a huge toll on my mental health, a huge toll on my physical health, and it was just not something that was sustainable for me. I ended up really questioning what my future was going to be in ministry. I knew that I could not keep working the way that I was working because of the toll it was taking on my health. So I took some time off and I used that time to reflect. In that reflection time, I realized that one of the biggest sources of frustration for me was the lack of inspiration that I felt. That was not on anybody but me, really. And so the only thing that I could do was find a way out of it. As I was working through that, there were three things that I ended up looking at. I looked at my mindset, I looked at my habits, and I looked at my goals and my expectations. So today, I want to dig through a little bit of that with you guys. The first thing I did was I shifted my mindset. And I cannot be more clear when I say this. Shifting your mindset is going to be the most important part of this process of finding your inspiration again. Even if you are in a healthy mindset, it is so important to be looking at how you're working, why you're responding to things the way that you are, because that significantly impacts the work that we're doing. You could take any of the tips that I give after this and it would be fine for a little while. But if you have not kind of looked at your mindset and changed it a little bit, all of those things will be so short term, you're going to burn out eventually. And so I cannot, again, recommend highly enough that this is the thing you do first. If it's the only thing that you do this one. Working for people who don't think like creatives is really, really difficult. You might work with pastors or administrators or directors who just have no idea how to communicate what they're wanting. They have no idea, how things are executed. They don't know the timeline of things. So it can be really, really hard to work in that environment a lot of the time, especially when in ministry we are expected to be, very gracious and very patient. It can be really difficult to manage all of those things at one time. You might also work with people who have no idea how to communicate about creativity at all. They are the, oh, I'll know it when I see it type people. And that can also be really frustrating because you're kind of just like picking away at things they don't like until you get to what they do like. And that is very taxing. Sometimes feedback can feel really personal and it can feel like your creative soul is just slowly being sucked away from you while you are managing, revisions that seem like you don't need to be making them, things like that. We're always going to need to work with people who are not creative like us. And it is really easy to get frustrated with this, but when we shift our mindset, it's a lot easier to manage. Here are a few of the most important things to remember as you're kind of walking through this process. The first thing to remember is to remember the why. We need to always be remembering why we do this. We have professional goals, we might have creative goals, but we can't let our personal goals jump ahead of the goal that the church has, which is to, again, share the gospel, make Christ known, guide people to lives of gospel transformation. That, at the end of the day, is the goal that we are working towards. Beyond that, a lot of times creatives don't see the fruit of their labor. We, give a final file and we don't really see what happens with that. We don't see the result of that. But just because we don't see it doesn't mean that it's not happening. Every piece that we make is a part of a bigger conversation. Ministries are using things that we're creating in their talks with people about the Lord, and that is really, really important. A video that you make might soften somebody's heart, either when they see it in the room on any given Sunday or whether they see it online. If you make a yard sign for a big event, somebody might see that and maybe that's their invitation into the door. I know a project that I've worked on in the past, I made a mailer for our college ministry that I thought had way too much copy on it. From a design standpoint, it felt like a nightmare, but there have been so many college students that have told our ministry the whole reason that they came was because they got that mailer in the mail. So I don't see the fruit of that. I don't see that happening regularly, but knowing that something that I made was sent out and then used to bring somebody in and, have a relationship with the Lord is really, really important. I do want to be really clear. The Lord does not need an LED wall in order to make ministry happen. The gospel is not limited because of graphics or anything like that, but it is really awesome that the Lord has given us abilities to create in a way that impacts his kingdom. The second thing to remember when you're shifting your mindset is that your work is not your identity. Creatives have a really, really hard time with this because everything that we make feels personal. Everything that we make has a touch of something that we love, in it. We thrive on making things that we are passionate about. But our value isn't tied to how many of our, projects make it to Sunday morning or how many people tell us good job. That can hurt a lot sometimes because, we put our heart and soul into something and it's something that we really care about. But we have to remember that even though it feels personal, it's not going to be personal. Just because a design is not good for a certain thing does not mean that it's trash. It does not mean that we don't have to do anything with it later. We can still use those things. If we attach our worth to recognition or approval, we are going to burn out so quickly. We have to remember that organizations are busy a lot. Any given week, there are thousands of decisions being made across the staff. And even though creativity and the things that we're doing are our life and we care about them so much, the ministries, it is not their life. They do care about the things that we're giving them and they are appreciative of those things, but it is not going to be on their radar to tell us, hey, I really value this. Hey, this is beautiful. I love this. It doesn't mean they don't think it, but it's just not going to register to them that that's something that might mean so much to you. If we're expecting people to tell us good job after we submit anything, we are going to end up really, really disappointed. Constant praise just isn't sustainable. And if that's what we're expecting, then we are setting everybody else up for failure, including ourselves. At the end of the day, our job is to serve faithfully through creating, and that's it. Whether we see the outcome or whether we get praise, it doesn't matter. It is not about what comes at the end. It's about serving with the gifts that we've been given. When I was really working on shifting my mindset, this next one was the biggest thing for me. But we are not working as artists. We are working as communicators. I think that as creatives, it's really, really easy to want to focus on self-expression and the things that we like and the things that we don't like. But at the end of the day, our job is not to create art for a person, for a collector. We are creating communication pieces for our ministries to use in ministry. Sometimes this is a very obvious concept to kind of wrap our heads around, but there are other times where it can be a really, really hard pill to swallow, especially when we have been in times where we're just constantly producing what seems to be the same graphic over and over again. It can be a little soul-sucking, but we have to remember there are seasons, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes we're able to be really creative and sometimes we're not. We cannot let the amount of creativity that we're allowed be the thing that dictates how well we do a project. At the end of the day, you can love what you do and still not be creatively fulfilled 100% of the time, and you have to be okay with that. When we stop expecting our jobs to fulfill every creative need that we have, it is going to be so much easier to show up with a joyful spirit on a regular basis. Once we've addressed our mindset, how do we stay inspired? One answer to this is we need to look at our habits. What are we doing to set ourselves up to be creatively inspired? As creatives, the answer to that is probably not a lot, but there are some things that we can do that are fun and exciting that can kind of help reignite that creative spark for us. The first recommendation that I have is to create every single day. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be good. You can create something that is horrible that might go right in the trash, but create something. Whether you are just doodling or you're writing or you're making music, something like that, just making something every day, whether you like it or not, is going to be a really, really good practice to get into to stay creatively inspired. For me personally, I keep a sketchbook on me pretty much at all times, and I'm either drawing something or painting something every single day to the point where it feels odd if I don't do it. By the end of the day, it's something that I really, really enjoy and something that really fuels me to keep being creative and seeing things in a creative way. Creating every day keeps you in motion and it shows you the things that you're good at. It shows you the things that might need work. It shows you the things that you're passionate about and things that excite you. And you can bring all of these things into your work as a creative in ministry. Over time, the things that you are working on a day-to-day basis may be launch pads for other creative things in the future that you can use at work. One really good example of this is something that we've been working on right now at work. Earlier this year, I got really into like oil painting and learning how all of that worked. And I ended up pitching doing an oil painting concept for Christmas and a sermon series that we are doing right now that are kind of overlapping. I pitched it because it was something I was really interested in. And even though I was horrible at it, I loved it. And we ended up being able to use that concept for these major events. I would have never gotten to that point had I not been stepping outside my comfort zone a little bit, creating something every single day and trying new things. So as you're doing this, as you're creating something every day, just kind of pay attention and see what excites you. Maybe there's a color palette that you kind of come up with that you love and think would be great for a graphic. Maybe there's a sketch that you do that turns into a video concept or a story. Maybe there's something that you made for fun that ends up relating to something that you guys are talking about at work. Daily creativity is practice. It's not for performance. And practicing things, being hands-on in creativity is going to help you see things in a more creative way. The second thing that I highly recommend that you do is to be creative in a way that is not natural to you. I know this doesn't sound super fun, but it really is. If you're a designer, maybe try writing a poem. If you're a videographer, maybe you're painting. If you sing, maybe you take up origami or something like that. Doing something creative that's outside of your natural creative lane is going to help you significantly because it teaches you how to solve problems in different ways. When you learn how to solve problems in different ways, you can then come back to that creative element that's in your lane and see it differently. This has made such a significant impact in the way that I create things because not only am I able to see things in a different way, but it gives me space from the projects that I'm working on. So when I come back to it, it's fresh. Maybe I see it differently. Maybe I like it better. There's a whole slew of things that you could see differently, but the space is really good. And the ability to problem solve in a different creative way is going to help you in that primary focus that you have. We have to remember that creativity thrives because we explore and we're curious, and we can't explore or be curious about things that we are in all the time. We have to get out of our comfort zones, and that is the best way to learn new things. If you're unsure how to do this, and I'm going to hate myself for saying this, but if you're unsure how to do this, I highly recommend that maybe using ChatGPT to help you out. Hear me out. I'm not a big fan of using AI in my work a lot of the times. That's just me personally, but ChatGPT can actually be a really, really helpful resource when it comes to stuff like this. One of my favorite things to do is to use it to make random generators. So I have multiple built within my profile. I'll basically say, hey, ChatGPT, give me a subject, a medium, and a time limit. And based on what it gives me, I will then create something within those parameters. I have one for writing. So if I'm creatively visually blocked, I'll try to write it out. So I'll say, hey, give me a prompt. It doesn't need to be a poem. Doesn't need to be fiction, nonfiction, whatever. You can create these generators in ChatGPT, and it will essentially give you something to do without you really having to think about it. And that will then, in a chain of events, help you, be more creative in different ways. The next thing that I recommend you do is to get connected with other creatives. You cannot be creative in a silo. I know a lot of times we like to kind of be alone and do our things, but we won't grow creatively if we're not seeing different viewpoints, different ways of going about things. So I highly recommend getting connected with other creatives, whether that's social media, within your church, in your community. You can go to different classes maybe. There are so many ways that you can connect with people that are creative, and being in community with other people who see things in a creative way is going to do nothing but springboard you into bigger and better things. The next thing that you can do to kind of jumpstart your creativity is to start a passion project and then finish it. A lot of times passion projects get abandoned because, we think that we have other important work to do. There's so many different reasons that we abandon them. But if we start a passion project and commit to finishing it, then we are not only honoring ourselves and our creativity, but we're giving ourselves an outlet, and we're allowing ourselves to be creative in any way that we want. There's kind of no limits. And that can be really fun and fulfilling for creatives. There are so many other practical tools that you can use to jumpstart your creativity. The last one that I want to talk about is putting your phone down. This is something that I think is way more important than people realize. It is so easy to get distracted when you're on your phone. I can't tell you how many times I've logged onto Pinterest or Instagram looking genuinely for inspiration, and I end up like doom scrolling recipes or, looking at outfits that I'm never going to buy, or, shopping for whatever. There are so many ways to get distracted on social media. And so the easiest way to eliminate that distraction is to just remove it. We can go outside and be inspired by nature. We can go to museums. We can, take a walk. We can look at the things around us and be inspired by those things, whether it's the way colors are being reflected with leaves or the way the light is coming off of a building. There's inspiration around us everywhere. Creation was created by a creator. As creatives, we can use that to find inspiration for ourselves. If you aren't able to get outside or get to a museum for whatever reason, there are a couple of places that I like to go on a rainy day or whatever. Sometimes I'll scroll through Unsplash. It's, kind of stock photos, but they're really pretty. And so I'll look at that and see what colors stand out, what textures stand out, what compositions stand out. I also really like the Arts and Culture app by Google. It's basically digital museums. So if you're never going to go see the Met in your life, you can go to this app and kind of look through some of the most famous artworks that are hanging in various museums across the world. And it's really, really cool to have that. Just, it's really cool to have that available to us. If you are using your phone, it is really important to remember that inspiration does not come from consumption. It comes from observation. There's a huge difference between observing things that are creative and consuming them. So as we're kind of looking for things that we want to be inspired by, we need to remember that the things on our screens are probably not going to be the best places to find those. And maybe we should take a walk or go outside or look at something else.
Longevity and creative ministry is a practice rather than an accident. Carrie's full course is inside SALT Community, and we've got way more coming your way soon. A great way to stay inspired long-term is to take a break and attend one of our SALT conferences. As a reminder, we've got SALT 2026 coming up in Dallas in a few weeks, and we'd love to have you there. Go to SALT2026.com for more details and see how you can save when you bring a team. But that's a wrap on this week's podcast episodes. We'll see you next Tuesday.